The Questions I Did Not Know I Had as a Modern Man, written and narrated by Peter J. Merrick. Over the past several years, I have spent more time alone than at any other point in my adult life, and honestly, that was never really part of the original plan. Like many men from my generation, I largely followed the standard roadmap society quietly hands young men before they are old enough, wise enough, or emotionally exhausted enough to question any of it properly. You work hard, you get married, you buy a home large enough to require both a mortgage and occasional emotional CPR. You raise children, you slowly accept stress, fatigue, and mysterious lower back pain as normal adult life. That was basically the program. And honestly, I followed it enthusiastically. I got married, built my business and professional reputation, worked constantly, raised daughters, chased success, worried about mortgages, and quietly convinced myself that permanent exhaustion was simply what responsible adulthood felt like. Looking back now, I realize I was moving through life so quickly that I never really stopped long enough to question many of the assumptions underneath the life I was building. Then life changed, and after my divorce, I unexpectedly found myself living alone in San Diego for the first extended period of my adult life. And honestly, at first it felt deeply strange. There is something humbling about sitting alone in your condo at night, realizing nobody is asking where you are, what you are doing, or why a grown man somehow owns 12 black t-shirts that all appear completely identical to everyone else but feel spiritually unique to him personally. At first, solitude feels uncomfortable because silence has a strange way of introducing you to yourself. But eventually, something unexpected begins happening. You start hearing your own thoughts clearly again. Somewhere between early morning walks near the harbor, long swims at the gym, quiet coffees, staring at the ocean, pretending I was contemplating consciousness, when occasionally I was honestly just thinking about Canadian ketchup potato chips, late night writing sessions, and long stretches of uninterrupted silence. I slowly began asking myself questions I did not even know I had. That became the prism through which I started seeing almost everything differently, not because I suddenly became wiser. Honestly, half the time I still lose my keys while they are sitting on top of the table right in front of me. I still occasionally walk confidently into the wrong floor of my condo building, like a man fully committed to a decision that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. What changed was much simpler than that. For the first time in my life, I finally had enough silence to question things I had unconsciously accepted for decades without ever really examining them. Questions about success, questions about masculinity, questions about relationships, questions about peace, questions about identity, questions about why so many individuals appear externally successful while internally looking like they are one unexpected email away from disappearing into the woods forever. That process slowly evolved into what will now become my 14th book. Unlike many of my earlier books focused on economics, wealth, taxation, and financial structures, this one has become deeply personal. It is really about what I have learned from solitude, aging, fatherhood, spirituality, identity, peace, and the deeply humbling realization that many of the things I once believed confidently at 30 quietly collapsed by 55 like cheap patio furniture during a windstorm. One of the insights that found its way into this book came after listening carefully to a conversation about modern relationships and why increasing numbers of younger men appear to be voluntarily choosing solitude over traditional marriage structures. What fascinated me most was that the conversation was not really about marriage. It was about peace. As a 57-year-old man born in 1969, I grew up inside a generation where marriage was simply considered part of adulthood. You met a woman, got married, bought a house large enough to create low-grade financial anxiety for 30 years, had children, worked constantly, and quietly accepted stress as part of being a responsible man. Most of us never really questioned the structure because everybody around us was following the same script while pretending they fully understood what they were doing. Spoiler alert, most of us did not. We were basically emotional improv actors with mortgages. Listening to younger men today feels profoundly different. What struck me most was that these younger men did not sound angry toward life or women at all. Honestly, they sounded thoughtful, self-aware, careful. What they were really discussing was emotional risk. After spending 35 years helping individuals manage financial risk, I immediately recognized the psychology because these younger men were approaching relationships the same way experienced investors approach major decisions. They were not simply asking what could go right emotionally. Increasingly, they were asking what could go catastrophically wrong financially, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually if the relationship eventually collapsed. And honestly, portions of the conversation almost made me laugh because at certain moments it sounded less like men discussing romance and more like senior partners reviewing liability exposure before purchasing a struggling company. At one point, I half expected somebody to request audited emotional statements along with a 5-year projection on future passive-aggressive behavior during holiday dinners and family vacations. But beneath the humor sat something very real. The man arguing against modern marriage was not arguing against love, intimacy, companionship, children, or family. In fact, he openly admitted marriage historically created stronger families, healthier communities, and more stable environments for children. What he questioned was whether the modern structure surrounding marriage still consistently produces those same outcomes strongly enough for many men to willingly embrace the emotional and financial risk now attached to it. That is a very different argument than bitterness. What fascinated me psychologically was realizing that many younger men no longer primarily speak about relationships through the language of romance. Increasingly, they speak through the language of peace, emotional stability, autonomy, and protecting the quality of their inner lives. And honestly, I understand why. Many younger men watched fathers, friends, co-workers, mentors, and good men spend decades building lives only to later watch those lives fracture emotionally, financially, psychologically, and spiritually. Previous generations often remained trapped inside deeply unhappy situations because there were very few socially acceptable alternatives available to them. Modern men increasingly no longer feel trapped. They can live independently, travel, build businesses, maintain friendships, create meaningful routines, and protect their peace. And honestly, maybe that is the deeper question I have been asking myself all along. Not whether marriage is good or bad, not whether solitude is better than relationships, but whether human beings are truly living consciously or simply accepting inherited life scripts without ever slowing down long enough to ask themselves whether those scripts actually align with who they really are. Perhaps beneath all the confusion and emotional exhaustion, human beings are still searching for the same things they have always searched for: peace, meaning, connection, and love. And perhaps all of us are simply consciousness trying to remember itself through the temporary experience of being human. Peter Merrick, A.K.A. Old Fart, still figuring it out, yet remaining hopeful I will.